Indeed, MLS is very much upon us. It's the summer months, and you'll be hearing and seeing a lot from this guy, Mikey Singh, at the Parlay over the next weeks and months. Mikey, we discussed a lot about TFC already this week. Looking at MLS as a whole now, with 13, 14 games into the season, about a third of the way in. By this point, we know, generally speaking, how teams are at this point of the campaign. What's been the biggest surprise for you so far?
I think without a doubt, it's been FC Cincinnati. I mean, this was a team that finished last place in the Supporters' Shield standings for each of its first 3 years in the league. This year, they're in a playoff spot right now, James, which kind of shocked everybody. And you have to give a lot of credit to Pat Noonan, who was a former assistant at the Philadelphia Union, came over this year to FC Cincinnati and kind of transformed that team. He's getting the best out of a guy like Luciano Costa, who everyone knows about his talent, but he wasn't really living up to those expectations based on what was around them, the environment. And Pat Noonan's come in, changed that. Another guy is Brandon Vasquez, who, I mean, he's one of the leading scorers right now in MLS, and he's the guy who really didn't have that many goals before this season. So he's getting the best out of his players. Cincinnati's, again, they're in a playoff spot, which is a surprise on its own. So I'd say for sure FC Cincinnati is the biggest surprise.
Do you think we'll be talking about them by the end of the campaign, saying they are the surprise of the season? Can they maintain this consistency?
Probably not. To be honest with you, if I had to bet, probably not. If you look at their last couple of matches, they've come back down to earth. They went on a 4-game winning streak, but 2 of those wins were over Toronto, another one over Chicago. So it wasn't really the best caliber of teams that they were playing. Now, the last 2 games, they've dropped. You know, they lost to the New England Revolution, which is a team that's kind of been in flux this year. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. And that's kind of been what FC Cincinnati has been. And I don't see them holding on to this, James.
Yeah, it happens, right? You often see these teams, these upstarts, the first few weeks of the season do really well and then come crashing down as the usual suspects find themselves. But hey, fingers crossed, right? I think new blood's important in this league. I saw today, actually, they're discussing 9 more teams potentially to expand at some point. So this league's only going to get bigger, and the Cincies of the world will have to get their results when they can get them. LAFC, listen, they're obviously a different story entirely. They're going to be a contender, you think, most seasons. They got the money there. They've just signed Giorgio Chiellini, the legendary Juventus and Italian centre-back. You surprised by this? It's not a DP deal, right? It's a TAM deal?
It's not a DP deal, which is why I'm sort of surprised by this because, hey, it's been rumored for a while, but even when the rumors first dropped, I'm like, LAFC is already the best team right now in Major League Soccer. And then they're going to go out and add a player in Chiellini's caliber. Sure, he's not what he used to be, but with his experience, his pedigree, his big game experience, throwing him into a side like LAFC, I mean, that almost seems unfair. So for them to be able to come out and do this and add a piece like Chiellini, it only cements their status as Supporters' Shield contenders and MLS Cup serious contenders.
Okay, but what's your thought about this? I mean, obviously, he can still play. We saw that this year. He's a good player. He's coming off a European Championship, of course, last year, but he's in his late 30s.
Yeah.
MLS has been criticised for being this graveyard for aging and dying footballers. And they're trying to say, no, we're not. And in recent years in Finland, they've moved away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you see a Chiellini come aboard, do you still think, man, they still have that kind of tag associated with them?
That's a good question. And in some instances, yeah, for sure. But at the same time, it's going to be a good measuring stick for the league because I see that needle moving where it used to be guys like, let's say, Thierry Henry, for example, coming into the league, a different caliber player perhaps, but coming into the league and tearing the league up, just regardless of how old he is. But now players who come over are not finding the same type of success. You look at someone like Xherdan Shaqiri, who's still very much in, I would say, close to his prime years. He's not coming in and finding success. Like his Chicago Fire team they're in last place right now. And people expected him to be one of the pieces that turns that team around. It's just not that easy where one player influences the game. So if you look at it through that lens, absolutely, like you still get that retirement league feel. But at the same time, it's going to be a good measuring stick again to see what kind of impact a player like Chiellini at his age, what he has in MLS.
And then you got Montreal, for example, playing really good football, relying on some real homegrown talents there as well. Yeah. So a different model under Wilfred Nancy, but are you surprised by how well they've played so far?
They do surprise me, and I think they are legit, though, with that being said. Like, this team is the deepest Montreal team that we have seen in years. They've moved away from bringing in some of those star players, like the Drogbas, and even, they let Victor Wanyama, they did not protect him in the expansion draft. He's still with the team, but that just goes to show what their philosophy is. They're moving away from the big names. They're investing in more domestic talent. A guy like Georgi Mihailovic, he's having a breakout season right now for CF Montreal. He got into the U.S. men's national team because of how good he has been playing. Unfortunately, he was injured, but that's just one of the many names that you can call on. Alistair Johnston, Canadian international that everyone here probably knows very well. And then Kamal Miller, Joel Waterman. This team is deep with talent. Their bench, Kai Kamara, coming off the bench, one of the more prolific goal scorers in MLS history. He's a bench piece for them. So I think Wilfred Nancy has done a really good job in terms of, we talk about environment, changing that environment in Montreal. They're playing really good football, and I do think they'll be contenders come the end of the year.
How's Ismaël Koné done this year? He kind of broke through towards the end of the last campaign, got into John Herdman's mind for Canada. How's he played?
Yeah, another good question. So he started off the year well, and then I think he's been battling injury. So we'll see what he looks like when he comes back. This talent's there. I mean, we all saw it the first couple touches that he took. He's a dynamic midfielder. He's not a midfielder that's kind of like anyone else on the men's national team. So he's going to be a story to kind of watch as this sort of season progresses.
And then there's Vancouver. The Whitecaps doing what the Whitecaps do, and their struggle. Fans will agree with that, by the way, and they're very frustrated by it. Same old story this year, or do you see some hope there?
It's a difficult question because when Vanni Sartini took over last season, there was this spark. 7 wins, 2 losses, 5 draws, the second best record in Major League Soccer over that span. And then this year, you kind of lost that buzz from the coaching change. You see it all the time. Any sport around the world, when a new coach comes in, it gives your team a spark.
The bump, right?
The bump,
yeah.
Exactly. We saw it with Javier Perez for a little bit at Toronto FC when he came in. There was that recent run of games that he had, or that stretch of games that he had, and TFC were playing well, but then it all kind of plummeted down to earth. We're seeing the same thing with the Vancouver Whitecaps. And not only Vanni Sartini, you look at a guy like Ryan Gauld. He came in, set the league on fire. People were talking about him. He has a goal and 2 assists this year.
Right.
That's it. I know they've been battling some injuries, but this team does not, even on paper, when you take a deeper dive, it does not look like it's a playoff contender, in my opinion. I think they need to make some significant changes there, and it seems like the same old storyline as you kind of alluded to when we talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps every year.
It is frustrating for sure. Mikey, you're on the TFC beat, of course. You're always busy scribbling on theparley.com. What's coming down the next few days?
I got some exciting things in the work, James. So Hugo Mbonge is the next up to watch if you're a Toronto FC fan. I'd say he's probably the best prospect in the Toronto FC Academy, and he just signed an MLS Next Pro deal. So he's the brother of Ralph Priso. I got the chance to chat with him and look out for a profile story on Mbonge, who, like I said, is probably next up to watch. And then we got some more exciting, bigger pieces as well to look out for at the parlay. I chatted with Jesus Jimenez. I'm going to be chatting with a lot of people that were involved in the decision to bring Jesus Jimenez to Toronto FC. So that's another piece I would say to watch out for, because his story is really interesting, because it kind of came out of nowhere. And yet he's been doing really well here with Toronto. So we'll learn a little bit more about him. And last but not least, probably the biggest story fans should look out for is a piece on Alejandro Pozuelo and his future here at Toronto FC.
Wow. Or does he have a future here? That's the question.
He have one?
We'll make sure you read Mikey Singh on theparley.com. He'll be here several times every week, breaking down all things Major League Soccer. Mikey, thanks, pal. Great job.